Okay, so here we are, just about to start part 2 of the interview with Nathalie. I'm quite glad now that I did make yesterday's video slightly shorter and basically ask for your thoughts, because there were quite a few realisations that I came to. When these interviews were first released, there was a bit of a softly approach by the creators who were talking about these interviews. And what was being put out there was essentially these guys weren't responsible for what happened to Maddie. They didn't choose to be involved with this. We need to be kind to them as a result. I think that part of that may have come from the fact that a Disney girlfriend had actually apparently caused issues for creators who had actually spoken about her interview. I think from memory, someone actually said that she had made privacy complaints against creators and had their content taken down. I'm not sure, maybe someone remembers that a bit more specifically than me. But there was certainly this notion being put out by a few of the larger creators that people shouldn't be critical of the flatmates or of Chris and Deb Stearns, all these people that were on the periphery and really couldn't be blamed for what happened to Maddie. So when I look at my approach yesterday to Nathalie's interview, I think I had still taken some of that on board and was trying really hard just to see all the positives. And there may have been a few things that I missed because of that. And I think the main thing I'm referring to here, and something that I do need to pay more attention to in this part of the interview, is the suggestion that actually Nathalie sounds like a bit of a narcissist also. And that whole thing of like attracts like. So that was a really good point that was made by one of my members. And it made me realise that I was perhaps going a little too easy on Nathalie, and perhaps allowing my perception to be coloured by this push from other creators in the past to be nice to the people who were on the periphery of the case. I know I was a little bit reluctant for a while to even come at Deb and Chris, because there was this whole push for, oh, they're just his parents, it's not his fault. Whereas we know that's not the case, really. So is Nathalie a narcissist? I'm undecided on that. Is she wanting to avoid being involved? Definitely. I mean, after all, they didn't actually even manage to get hold of her and pin her down till the 7th of March. So this was quite some time after everything had happened. So definitely it sounds like she really didn't want to be involved. Could there have been some element of guilt on her part for perhaps not acting on things she'd seen or not following gut instinct? Quite possibly. And another interesting suggestion that was made by someone, which could actually make a lot of sense, and that is perhaps she did not want to get on Jenn's bad side. The suggestion that Jenn comes across as someone who you probably don't want to get offside, which made me stop and think about the way her family appears to interact with her. I mean, that body cam footage where the family's steering well and truly clear of Jenn and Stefan. Nobody in the family spoke up and said anything. Is it because they're protecting Jenn, or is it because there is a side of Jenn that they just don't want to unleash? So that's definitely an interesting thought, and I think there's quite a few things to keep in mind going through this interview. Certainly I can see the side of it in terms of her being a mother who her first priority would be to protect her son. And perhaps if that means not getting involved, then she's going to do so. But certainly you guys have given me a lot to think about as we go into part 2 of this interview. So on that note, and after some serious procrastination on my part, let's just jump in.
Okay. So before we dive into that dynamic, relationship-wise, so what was your relationship with Angelica?
So Angelica's a very nice person. She's a very cordial person. You can tell that that she comes from like a family that taught her like about her culture. She would cook a lot, and like I'm not the best cook, so like I like to learn and I like to see, and especially if the food smells good, me and my son are there, you know.
Yeah.
So it ends up being like a little bit of like because Maddie was downstairs, we ended up kind of watching her cooking together. But that's as far as it really goes, because again, you know, I'm an operation manager. I work between 40 to 50 hours a week.
Where do you work at?
It's called Integrity Reconstruction and Roofing. So we work in like plumbing and service industry, like the service, like plumbing industry. So we go to people's houses and
Gotcha.
yeah, like fix their plumbing. But anyways, I pretty much run like 3 different departments. So I'm just always like in and out. But as far as like every time I talked to her, it was really pleasant, hi and bye. If I sat down and spoke to her, it was like we had like a Valentine's Day type of situation, because like we were all like at that point single, and like it's especially for her, she doesn't really have anybody out here, so like we just try to do something special together. And I get to know her and her situation, but it wasn't anything like I'm not like. Even to now, if I check in with her, it's just to make sure she's okay. But like, am I talking to her every day? I never really spoke to her every day. If I spoke to her, because I saw her in the kitchen cooking, essentially.
And none of these people bothered to go out of their way to interact with each other, did they? Now, it certainly could point to someone being a narcissist, saying that basically, you know, I worked 40 to 50 hours a week, so I just, you know, didn't have time to interact with this person. This is after acknowledging that actually she didn't really have a support network around her. This is Angelica. So she's basically saying here, well, you know, Angelica didn't have family and that around her for support. And so, you know, we included her if we were all hanging out together, essentially. But I was far too busy to actually pay any attention to her, unless she was cooking, because I liked the smell of the food. Yeah, I could see how that could be construed as narcissistic. I mean, there's also the other side of it that, a lot of people who are neurodivergent, if you have ADHD or you have autism, then after a full day of peopling, as in after a full day of being at work, having to interact with people all day, having all this additional stimulation going on, then sometimes you do just want to go home and be left alone and not interact with anyone. So I can also see that side of it in terms of the working long hours and just kind of wanting to chill out. Of course, I'd be interested to know if them basically hanging out and watching her cook was rewarded with a free meal or even a free part of a meal. Because that would certainly be incentive to interact with someone if you could actually get food out of them. But yeah, to me it's such a weird cultural thing, this notion of people sharing a house and not really getting to know each other. And in this case, they were living together for 2 years. So you would kind of think that there would be this natural curiosity to learn a bit more about the person that you're living with and to just connect with them.
So when you would live there, you said a majority of your time was spent in your bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
Any point that you would hang out in the living room? I know some of the living room was partitioned off for Maddie.
Yeah.
Did everybody kind of gather around the living room, or did everybody pretty much stay themselves in their room?
So, if we gathered, it was because either like I was cooking and Jeremiah and Maddie were watching me cook, or we were having a birthday get together or Easter get together. Like we try our best to keep the kids together throughout the occasions, just because all of us are so busy throughout the week. And when I mean us, I mean like the group of kids. It was Maddie, Aloysia, and Jeremiah. You know what I'm saying? So like those were the kids that were typically together, and Aloysia's sister.
Who's Aloysia?
It's Stephanie's daughter.
I gotcha. Okay. Yep.
So those were the moments that we would really congregate around that area. But as far as on a day-to-day, I was mostly upstairs. Because if we were home, it's because we had finished going to school, picking up the groceries, taking my son to therapy. The errands of the day were done, and our time to kind of like calm down, start our night routine. That's the time that we were pretty much home. Is during the time that we're settling down, going to sleep. Because then the next morning we're back outside. Either whether it's the weekend, we're out. We're either walking, hiking in the lakes, trying to keep ourselves busy. If I was home, it was momentarily take a nap, get ready, be out again, parents' house. So I just intentionally for my son, I try to keep myself really busy. Because I work so much throughout the week.
Gotcha.
So if there wasn't really, in my eyes, the only time that we were really downstairs were when we were celebrating something or having like a special like little event or get together for the kids.
All right.
So he's asked her about hanging out in the shared living area. And this is still in the context of her relationship with Angelica. But what she's essentially saying here is that she really doesn't actually spend time hanging out with Angelica. The only time she's out in the shared living area is if she's cooking and her son and Maddie were there watching her cook, or if they were doing something for the kids that was like, because of some sort of event like Easter or something. And what she's referring to there is Maddie, her son, and Stephanie's daughter. So again, it doesn't really include Angelica. Now, I can understand what she's saying here too in terms of if she's home, and she specifically refers to her son, saying, we're inside upstairs getting ready for bed and everything, because routine is just so important for people who are on the spectrum. So I could imagine that it was important for her son to have time that was, just calm time with not too much stimulation before bed, and to have regular routines. So to have that wind down time before bed without other people around, just, in their space. I find it really interesting that she's talking about when her son's around on the weekends, she's out hiking and doing stuff like that, and basically saying she's doing all this for her son. She's keeping busy for her son. But the message I'm getting here too is that for her, this townhouse was basically just where you stopped briefly in between work and play. Sounds like she actually didn't particularly like spending a lot of time in this townhouse, because she's essentially saying either we were here getting ready for bed and heading to bed, maybe cooking, or we were gone from the townhouse. Yes, she worked a 40, 50-hour week, but at the same time, I think 40-hour week, that's a regular full-time job for most people, and yet they still have plenty of time at home. So I do feel that maybe there was a bit of avoidance of being in the townhouse, and maybe that did have something to do with the other people that were there.
So, Stefan, how long? Okay, so you've lived there 2 years. Was Stefan already living there at the time, or?
So, I know, and like I said, he was very much, it seemed like he was part of the furniture type. Like, he was just around for so long in the background that, like, I want to say that when I started living there, he was already, like, if he wasn't moved in, he was already, like, settled in type.
Would it fair to say that he was already established there, like clothes and?
I think so, like, belongings, but, like, really in her life, yes.
So someone made a really good comment that I hadn't considered, and that is that maybe all this vagueness about when Jenn and Stefan were or weren't living together goes back to Jen's payments, and that her payments may have been affected if she was in a de facto relationship. Because here again, they're trying to establish here if Stefan was already moved in with Jenn at the time that Nathalie moved in, or if he was just, coming and going. And she's again being really vague. She's not sure. And they ask her, well, was he established? Did he have clothes and stuff there? Here's where I have a problem. It should be pretty clear whether or not he's actually moved in or coming and going. Simply because if he wasn't moved in, he was still living with his parents. And if he was still living with his parents, he was living a 3-hour drive away. You can't tell me that he was driving from his parents to the townhouse every day doing a 6-hour round trip. So you would have to know if he was moved in. Because if he wasn't moved in, he would be absent for considerable periods of time. So I just find it really odd that she's so non-committal here. But yes, it could be that because right through, even in Jenn's interviews and everything, even in Stefan's interviews, everyone is so vague in terms of timelines as to when Stefan and Jenn were living together. It seems like nobody's got a clue. And sure, you could argue that, well, Nathalie was working a lot of the time, so she wasn't there a lot of the time. But here's the thing. She's coming and going every day. She leaves the townhouse at, 7:45 of a morning when she's got her son with her. Now, sure, she may not see Stefan anywhere inside the townhouse, but we've heard from these flatmates that they knew what car Stefan drove. So if she's leaving the townhouse early every morning to go to work, she would know if Stefan's car was there. Seems like he was parking it pretty close to the townhouse. And when you look at the body cam footage, you can see that all their cars were parked fairly close together. So she would have been aware if his car was there or not. Which would be a pretty good clue as to whether or not he was just coming and going, or whether or not he was living there full time. We know Stefan is not a morning person, so if you saw his car there every day when you went to work, that probably means he was living there.
Like, he, believe me, and it's so weird knowing just the all little stuff that I know now because you're around someone for so long. And it's like you don't really ever know anybody, at all. Mm-hmm. But anyways, unfortunately, seeing him wasn't something, like I said, he was part of the background.
Honestly, why can't these people just say what they mean? So she's talking about knowing little stuff that she knows because you're around someone for so long. And then, but it's like you don't ever really know anybody at all. And back to he was part of the background. Don't look at me, officer, I didn't see anything. That's the way it sounds to me. On one hand, she's saying, you know all this little stuff about a person because you're around them for so long. But then you don't really know them. Well, you're a female, you're a mother. What was your gut instinct? She hedges around anything to do with Stefan. But it seems pretty clear that she didn't like even being around this guy. That she didn't like having any connection with him. I mean, I'm surprised that rather than continually saying he was part of the background or part of the furniture, I would expect her to be saying that he was hanging around like a bad smell. Because that's the vibe I get. But she certainly seems really, really reluctant to address anything to do with him.
What was your relationship with him?
So, I don't, only issue with him really was that throughout the time of, if they ever had like a fight or a breakup, the venting that I received from Jenn was that, you know, he didn't provide at all, and he didn't like. So I mean, I have my expectations for someone that I'm with, and like we share those expectations, me and Jenn, and he just wasn't living up to that. And it was mostly because of whatever mental health stuff. Listen, everybody has a mental health. I don't want to judge anybody, but those still got to get paid. And that was always my issue. And when I don't like to be ingenuine, so when I feel that way, I keep you at like an arm's length. Mm-hmm. Like I don't really get close to you like that. Like if I can't really fucks with you like that, like I'm not really around you being fake like that. Mm-hmm. So that was how I kept him. And again, very much part of like the scenery. Like he didn't stand out to me like.
So she says she doesn't want to judge anybody, but then basically essentially says that she doesn't associate with him because he's a loser. So she's been asked about her relationship with him. And again, she's struggling to get out a full sentence. So I don't like... I mean, how many times does she say like in this interview? My only issue with him really was that... So the way she keeps speaking is that there's these constant pauses and she's not giving full sentences. But note before she starts talking about Jenn venting to her and everything, she says her only issue with him really was that, and then she goes on to talk about Jenn venting when they broke up. When someone says, my only issue really is this, pretty much what they're actually saying there is actually, I've got several issues, but here's the main one. This is the one that I'm going to verbalise. But I'm not going to tell you the other issues that I have. It's about not wanting to appear judgmental. Which, of course, as she even says, I don't want to judge anybody. And yet it seems pretty clear that she is judging him. She can't stand this guy. That is the underlying message that I'm hearing here. She talks about him not providing for them at all, and how basically her expectations in a relationship are the same as Jenn's, and he wasn't living up to that. And then she speaks about basically he didn't work. And the way she's talking about it pretty much is she didn't like him because he didn't work. She did actually judge him because he didn't work. But, you know, she makes a valid point talking about mental health issues and that. Some people do use that as a cop-out. And he certainly wasn't making any attempt to do anything worthwhile with his life. So I think I would have judged him exactly the same way had I been sharing a house. But I would have been upfront about it. She's still kind of skirting around the sides of the issue. She's not saying, look, at the end of the day, the guy was just a complete waste of space. He didn't do anything around the place. He didn't contribute financially. Any of that sort of stuff. It takes her forever just to say, essentially, that he didn't support Jenn and Maddie financially. he didn't work, but she doesn't judge anyone.
Would you consider him a friend?
No.
Okay.
No, because I never spoke to him outside of the hi and bye. I never had his number. If I know anything about him, it's because Jenn would vent to me the issues that they would have as a couple.
What kind of issues would they have?
It's that. It's the having to. He was at the house and like, because he lived there longer than I did for sure. So, just not bringing in money of his own, really, not being able to hold a job and really whatever mental health issues he had, being that the crutch of why he can't do and operate.
Now, did you form this opinion prior to all of this happening within the last week, or have you talked to Jenn and you kind of came up with the same?
They've been together for they were together for 5 or 7 years between that, and this is feedback from all these years.
Okay.
So once we started living together, the venting, there was no communication in regards to the relationship, just because once you start living together, I want to be able to hold the peace, and she does too, and it's hard to let someone in when you live with them like that. I don't want, if she ever needed to talk to me about anything, I know that she would. But when we started living together, we didn't talk as much as when we did when we didn't live together. I would see her every day. If we took the kids to the pool, then we had maybe 15, 20 minutes to catch up while the kids were at the pool. But we wouldn't really talk about Stefan.
I think one thing we can be certain of here is that she wants as much separation as possible from the issue. He asks her if she would consider herself friends with Stefan, and she says no 3 times in a row. I think that's a resounding no. And she then says, well, other than hi and bye. And here's what is interesting, and I'm trying to figure out if she's just referring to overall, or if this is a slight slip. Because she says he lived there longer than I did, for sure. Now, yes, you would agree with that, but we also know that him and Jenn moved in and out of that place a few times. And when asked earlier about if he was actually moved in when she moved in, and she was all vague about it, she didn't point out then anything along the lines of, well, I don't know, but I do know that he had lived there before. So, is she referring to that one instance and actually slipping up here and saying actually he did move in before she did? Or is she looking at the big picture? Because she's not really being specific, and you could see it either way. And then she talks about how Jenn would vent to her about him, about the couple issues, about him not bringing in money of his own, not being able to hold a job, using his mental health issues as an excuse. But here's the irony. You could apply all that to Jenn, pretty much. Although I guess, clearly, she was getting disability payments. She was probably getting payments for Maddie. But essentially, she was only paying her way because she was getting disability payments. She wasn't holding down a job. And she certainly was using her mental health issues as an excuse for not doing anything. And the big difference there was that she was responsible for a child. So it's just really interesting that you have her passing judgment here on Stearns on all the things that Stearns and Jenn have in common. Okay, and then as for saying after she moved in, she didn't really talk to Jenn about Stefan because she wanted to keep the peace. I sort of get that if you were friends with both of them. But she's pretty much acknowledged here that she didn't have anything whatsoever to do with Stearns. She's made it pretty clear so far throughout this interview that she didn't approve of him. She didn't like him. And yes, I can understand that when someone is in a relationship with someone, you're not going to point out the things that are wrong with that person to them. But it sounds to me like she was saying that before she moved in, Jenn would bitch and moan to her about Stefan, even though they were still together. And then after she moved in, that stopped. And it sounds like that stopped from her decision. She's saying she wanted to hold the peace. But it also sounds like once she moved in, she actually had fewer conversations with Jenn overall. She's saying when we started living together, we didn't talk as much. We'd see each other every day, might talk if we've taken the kids to the pool. So was she distancing herself from Jenn after she moved in? She was avoiding talking about Stearns after she moved in, even though it sounds like that was something that was a common conversation beforehand. And she was having fewer conversations with Jenn. Now, we know from Jenn's interviews that she actually saw Stefan as being a bit of a loser and was quite happy to point out his failings to the detectives. So I suspect that for Jenn, in his absence, Stefan would have been a popular topic of conversation. I also get the impression, based on everything Nathalie has said so far, that she is a somewhat judgmental person. She certainly didn't see Stearns as being someone who was worthy of her attention. Face it, he really wasn't worthy of anyone's attention. But when she was living there, he was Jenn's partner. And yet she still viewed him as this complete utter loser that wasn't worth giving the time of day. So, given Jenn's willingness to carry on about Stearns, given Nathalie's opinion of Stearns, and her apparent tendency to be judgmental, makes me think there's more to this than just wanting to keep the peace because you share a house with someone. And this goes back to her talking about the little things that you learn about people when you're around them so much. My question is the reason she was speaking less with Jenn and the reason that she didn't interact with Stearns Is that because of things that she was aware of and she didn't want to be involved? Because that's another common theme here. How many times has she said, one way or other, that she didn't want to be involved? I think it would be fair to say that Nathalie is the sort of person who doesn't want to be involved in anything that doesn't affect her, which certainly makes her sound like a narcissist. She's certainly not appearing now as someone who did show a lot of empathy towards others. She's definitely giving that impression of someone who stays in their own lane and doesn't want to know about it unless it affects her.
Like, I think it came to a point where she had talked and vented so much to me when they finally broke up, that it...
So, other than... Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But did she come out and tell you the reason that they were breaking up is because he's not providing, or were there other reasons?
That was pretty much, like... I think they were fighting a lot. And
what would they fight over? Do you know?
I don't, like, know specific details. I just know that, like, sometimes I would hear them fighting, like, yelling. But, like, I couldn't really hear specific details. And then, like I said, she really stopped talking to me once they got back together, because I think she felt kind of, like, weird, her talking so much shit to me about him breaking up and then at some point getting back together.
This interview is so frustrating. So, before she said that basically once she moved in with Jenn, they didn't really talk about Stephanie anymore because she wanted to keep the peace. And now she's contradicting herself. And let's acknowledge too that she didn't answer his question. So, if she makes this comment something along the lines of that Jenn had talked and vented so much that when they finally broke up and then he cuts her off. So, I mean, that comment there is saying that she had talked and vented while Jenn had talked and vented while they were still together. And then the detective asks her, basically, him not providing financially, was that the main reason, or was that the reason they broke up? Is that what Jenn told you? And she doesn't say anywhere here that Jenn told her anything about why they broke up. She doesn't confirm if this is the reason why they broke up. She just goes bumbling on about them fighting. She's like, that was pretty much like, I think they were fighting a lot. So there's no yes or no. Not even that was a factor. She just jumps across to, they were fighting a lot. I don't know specific details. I could hear them yelling, but I couldn't hear what they were saying. It's a small townhouse. There's no carpet. I'm surprised that she couldn't hear what they were saying, especially because noise carries upstairs. Although her bedroom, I think, was the opposite side from Jenn's room, so maybe that's the reason why. But surely, if they were fighting and yelling that much, she must have picked up something. I don't know. Like I said, it could just be because she was on the other side of the townhouse, and also she was saying about having her TV running a lot of the time. But she completely contradicts herself by saying she, as in Jenn, stopped talking once her and Stefan got back together. Now, this was the thing that I remember listening to last time I heard this interview. And then I was thinking I must have got confused, because she's just, before saying this, basically said that after she moved in, she wasn't talking with Jenn about Stefan because she wanted to keep the peace. So she's giving two contradictory answers. Either she stopped talking to Jenn about Stefan because she wanted to keep the peace, or Jenn stopped talking about Stefan because they had gotten back together. I mean, maybe she is just one of these people that talks around everything so much that you have to sit there for half an hour and wait for the answer to finally pop out. But she certainly seems to do it more so when it comes to talking about Jenn and Stefan. Particularly when it comes to talking about Stefan. I mean, I half expected her to get to the end of all that and do a Jenn and say, what was the question again? I mean, essentially the information she's given here is that her and Jenn used to talk about Stefan. Jenn used to moan about Stefan up until the point that she moved into the townhouse, and then it was off limits because she wanted to keep the peace. But then she flips that and Jenn was the one who stopped talking about Stefan after her and Stefan got back together, meaning after Stefan moved back into the townhouse in 2022. Is that what she's talking about? But it's like, well, I chose not to have those discussions to keep the peace, but actually, Jenn chose to stop talking about that because she'd gotten back together with him. And even that's a contradiction, because she talks about them basically having discussed Stefan heaps before they broke up. So I can't even wrap my head around it. I can't find a solid answer in this. She hasn't even given a solid answer in terms of why Jenn and Stefan broke up. Nobody seems to be capable of giving a solid answer as to why Jenn and Stefan broke up. We get this vague thing about him not pulling his weight and eating all of their food, yada yada. But she's been asked outright, him not doing his bit financially, is this the reason they broke up? And she doesn't say yes. She doesn't even finish the sentence. That was pretty much, well, okay, I would have taken that to be that was pretty much the reason. But then she goes off on a tangent and talks about them fighting. So, if you can make sense of this better than me, please let me know. Because she just is just so contradictory. She does. She talks in circles. She throws in so much word salad that you sit there after she said it and think, what the heck did she just say?
She didn't really even tell us that they were back together, to be honest with you. So, like, at some point within the 2 years of me living there, like, she stopped really venting to me about Stefan and about the relationship. If there was really any issues with wanting to get a job, you know, and I was really proud of her because she ended up having the job at the Disney concierge, and she was doing super well, like in that mental aspect. But like it wasn't really about Stefan. It was more like about personal, like having to, maintain this job, like, cause she's never really been able to maintain like a really good stable job herself because of her own issues. So she was really excited about this, and those were the type of conversations that we were trying to have just to kind of stay positive.
Well, that's really confusing, isn't it? First of all, she's saying, we didn't talk about him after I moved in because she wanted to keep the peace, or whatever she said. And now she's saying at some point during the 2 years after I moved in, she stopped venting about Stefan and her relationship. So now she's saying that actually Jenn did still vent to her after she moved in about Stefan. She can't make up her mind. She's definitely being evasive. And then she brings up the thing about Stefan. I think she's referring to Stefan and not having a job. But then she switches to talking about Jenn getting this concierge job at Disney and how proud she is of her. So she's doing her best to avoid talking about anything to do with Stefan and anything to do with Jenn's relationship to Stefan. And certainly with regards to anything that, any tension that occurred in the house because of Stefan. This is something that she is not going to mention with the detective. She's circling the topic, but she won't give anything solid. And then she goes on about Jenn doing super well, being in a better place mentally. Well, that contradicts Jenn, doesn't it? Because Jenn's like, I have all these problems. I can't even answer properly because of my brain. And, she finishes off what she's saying here by saying, we were trying to have the positive conversations, about Jenn having a good, stable job, and because she hadn't been able to maintain a good, stable job in the past. And she's basically trying to infer, having gone back and forth over whether or not they actually discussed stuff to do with Stefan. Now she's doing this about face and saying, we just tried to have positive conversations, things about how Jenn was doing in life and everything. So, it's like she's trying to say now, actually, we never spoke about Stefan.
But I know that the biggest issue that she would tell me when she was venting to me was about him not being able to provide. I think at some point, once he started working, like, he would spend money on stupid shit. It was always very financial, the issue that she would vent to me.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, because this is just one of those bits of information that's just sitting there in my brain, and I don't know where it comes from, so I don't know if it's correct. But didn't Stefan only work for Disney for a year? Surely at the most it would have been 18 months, but in my head I'm thinking it was only a year. So after saying, she never vented to me after Stefan moved, or after I moved in, after Nathalie moved in, and then at some point in time over the 2 years she stopped venting, like total contradiction. Now she's saying the biggest issue was him not being able to provide, and talking about him working and spending his money on stupid stuff. And that Jenn's biggest complaint was always financial. So it seems like Jenn did continue to vent to Nathalie about Stefan, pretty much right up until when he moved out, perhaps. Because if she's venting about him working but still buying stupid stuff, then we can date that back to within 18 months of what happened to Maddie. So she can claim that Stefan was on the periphery and she had no idea about what was going on, and Jenn never spoke to her about any about that stuff after she moved in because she didn't want to keep the peace. But she keeps going on and basically showing that she's lied because she's contradicting herself and talking about the things that they did talk about after she had moved in. I find it amusing that she's saying that in terms of Jenn and Stefan, the biggest gripe was always financial. So maybe having him move upstairs was, in fact, part of a plan to get extra money into the household directly from Chris. You know, you're not bringing enough money in now that you're working because you're buying your toys. So we need to find another way to bring money into this household. How about if you move upstairs, get your dad to pay rent? I mean, do we know that money was going to Juan?
Gotcha. How was... All right, so when they broke up and got back together, when roughly was that? Do you remember? The last couple of weeks, months, year?
No. He had moved out. He had been out the house because remember he went upstairs for like maybe 4 months, and then he had been out the house already for like I think like between 7 or 8 months before I started seeing him again. Like it was like I want to say between 6 or 8 months before I started seeing him again.
All right, so within the last couple months, say December of last year up until now, how often do you think you would see him?
Maybe a total of 3 times, maybe.
Now, this is what really, really frustrates me with Detective Morris. And that is that I'm not sure if he just doesn't listen clearly or he just doesn't bother with clarifying questions. But they seem to be at cross purposes here. He's asked her about when they broke up and got back together. So I guess in Nathalie's mind, Stefan being there on that Sunday night doesn't count as them being back together, because he's like, well, you know, when did this happen? Was it last couple of weeks, months, year? So he's saying, you know, the last time this occurred, but then he's taking her back to before Stefan moved out of the townhouse in December. So she doesn't give a solid time for what she's talking about, but she's definitely not talking about this most recent time, because she says, well, he was gone for about 6 to 8 months before she started seeing him again, which to me says that they had broken up at some time in 2021, perhaps. And then when he moved back in, midway through 2022, that was them getting back together again. That's how I interpret what she's saying here. But he hasn't listened, he hasn't asked for clarification, and he totally skips over that, which I think is important information. They need to have a timeline of when Stephen was actually living with Jenn. Because if they have images that are basically Stephen with Maddie in Maddie's fake room during a period of time when supposedly Jenn and Stephen were broken up, that's huge. That comes back on Jenn in major way. But he's disregarded this completely and gone on to asking about how many times between December and when Maddie went missing, or you know what I mean, how many times between December and the end of February had Stephen been back? And she says 2 to 3 times maybe as well. So in Jen Soto's derivative use interview, we've been given this information in other interviews. I'm not sure if she said it at the beginning of the derivative use as well. But it seems to be commonly agreed on that he had returned 2 or 3 times after he moved out in December. And then in the derivative use, I think it was, wasn't it? Jen said, oh, he only came back once. She's talking about him coming back to collect parcels. But then she said that he only came back once. But here we have Nathalie confirming that actually he came back 2 to 3 times. So why is it so important to Jen to say actually he only came back once? If you weren't guilty of anything, if you had nothing to hide, why would you need to lie about how many times this guy came back to your place after he had moved out?
I think.
Anything like significant why he would be coming back? Or just random times? Or
I think the first 2 times I was like, I believe he just was stopped by.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say.
Did Jen say why he would come by?
No, if I saw him, it was because I literally physically saw him, like sitting in the chair where he sit, and I like again just hey, good Jen, good, and then just go upstairs.
Okay.
Okay, here's my question to those of you who have dug into this side of things. I'll be perfectly honest. I have not sat down and dug into the dates of the images and the videos. It's something that I find quite triggering, so I actually have not dug into that side of it at all. And I'm not sure if I will. I'm not sure if I can quite achieve the right level of detachment to actually look at that side of things. So I have avoided it. But my question is this. If you are one of those people who have looked at those particular dates of incidents, and to be honest, I'm not even sure which document they're in. There are so many documents. Are there images and videos between December and February that are recorded? That's my question. Because here he's asking her about, if she knows why he was coming back. She doesn't give an answer. She just gives what she saw, essentially. The first 2 times he just stopped by. And she says basically she knows that because she saw him sitting in a chair in the living area. Well, given her work hours, given that she spent most of her time upstairs, I'm wondering how she knew that he was just stopping by, as opposed to him actually staying overnight or something. Because as she said, she leaves for work early in the morning. Stefan's not going to surface before she leaves for work. So maybe she's just like, well, his car was gone, so I know he was gone. But the detective doesn't ask her these things. Doesn't ask her, how do you know he was just stopping by? Did you see him leave? He doesn't double down and ask her, okay, so these times when he appeared to be just stopping by, did Jenn tell you why he was there? So she's playing this detective really well. She's not answering his questions. And he's not pressuring her to give the answers. I mean, we look back to when he did that video interview with Stefan. He never pushed that hard until the end, when he pushed too hard and suddenly Stefan basically shut everything down. I get the feeling, and I apologise because obviously it's not my place to criticise, but I get the feeling this guy is old school, maybe hasn't done any additional professional training since becoming a detective. Maybe he feels that his way of doing it is all that he needs. But I just feel that compared to the younger detectives, he's a bit toothless. And in this interview, she's basically called the shots. If she doesn't want to answer something, then she will go off on a segue. And she will do it so well because she will carry on, well, not carry on, but she will go off on this detour and start giving so much detail relating to this detour that it seems like he forgets that actually this has got nothing to do with the question that he asks. And he doesn't redirect her and say, okay, so, but this was the question, what is your answer? And this is happening so much through this interview. She doesn't like the question. She gives a different answer that doesn't actually answer the question. She talks in circles and gives contradictory answers. And he never seems to want to clarify what she's actually saying. Now, while I will confess that I am way behind in answering people's comments, the reason why this video wasn't out yesterday is that I am a little bit unwell at the moment, and I got halfway through this and basically just reached a point where I went back to bed. But even though I'm not answering people's comments, I am reading them and trying to catch up with a few. But there was one comment that was made by someone which was, I think, is important to discuss here. So, for me coming from Australia, I really don't have a great deal of understanding of Latino culture. It's something that is almost non-existent here in Australia. I mean, we are an extremely multicultural country, but we're talking communities from like Asia, Greece. We do have a large Italian community, but essentially it is a very different cultural makeup from America. So I found this really interesting to learn, And what was said by one of the commenters, and forgive me if I don't get it quite right, but this commenter said that basically Latino communities tend not to report stuff to law enforcement as much, unless it's the bigger stuff like, a missing child, etc. They tend to close ranks and, deal with things in-house. This is my interpretation of what I read. Correct me if I'm wrong. And this is me relaying what I was told in a comment. So essentially what is being said by this commenter is that as far as Jenn's family was concerned, they closed ranks and protected Jenn. And Nathalie was on the periphery. She was part of that because she was Stephanie's best friend. And that certainly makes sense because she is definitely doing her best to avoid discussing anything that relates to Stefan and doing her best to avoid anything that might show Jenn in a bad light.
All right. What's your work schedule like throughout? Like, is it pretty consistent or?
Yeah, I have to be because I go by my son's schedule.
Oh, okay.
So I try to be out the house between 7:45. Well, I have to be out the house by 7:50. But like 7:45 is the time that I'm trying to like be out, and from there, I drop my son off here so that my parents can take him to school. Mm-hmm. He needs to be at school by 9, mm-hmm. and I start work at 9.
Gotcha.
So I'm typically here between 8:15 and 8:20, and then it takes me about 30-40 minutes to get to work, depending on traffic. And I work in Ocoee, the office in Ocoee. So I'm there until Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. I'm there between 9, I get there, and 3:30. Mm-hmm. On Wednesdays, I'm there between 9 and 2:30 because Wednesday's early day.
Early day, right.
Yeah.
I'm assuming he goes to the street right down,
mm-hmm.
school right down the street, okay.
Yeah. So that's pretty much the office work. Once I'm done with that, we either have dinner here or I make something at home. Mm-hmm. So we could be home between, and that's like, let's say if I don't have to pick anything up, we're home between 6 and 7. We're home between 6 and 7. I finish like an hour of work. He finishes his homework. Mm-hmm. Then we start getting ready for bed, and we're tucked in by 8:30. I either fall asleep with him, mm-hmm. or I stay up watching TV and finishing work until I fall asleep.
Gotcha. Okay.
So essentially, she's saying that she has got her work hours basically sorted out to fit in around her son's schedule. So she leaves early enough to drop him off at her parents' place so that they can take him to school. She then leaves work early enough to be able to spend time with her son after school. What's interesting though is that even though she's leaving work early enough to spend time with her son after he finishes school, she doesn't just collect him from her parents' place and come back to the townhouse. Sounds like she actually spends quite a bit of time there in the afternoon. She's saying she doesn't give a definite amount of time as to how often it happens, but she says quite often we have dinner at my parents' house, and then she's saying she's home between 6 and 7 in the evening. So my takeaway from that is that she was basically doing her best not to be in that townhouse. She was avoiding being there. I mean, for me, when you finish work, the first thing you want to do is just go home and chill out. And if you're in a business like hers where you're having to deal with people all day, then that bit of quiet time at the end of the day is precious. So it says a lot that she's happier to stay at her parents' place and have dinner there and then come home later. Basically come home so she can do a bit of extra work and her son can do his homework. And then basically, an hour or so after that, they're off to bed. So it certainly sounds that she didn't like being in that townhouse. And it was more just the place that you stop to go to bed, not a place that you live. I mean, we're talking about someone who has known Jenn for 20-something years, based on her saying that her and Stephanie had been friends since middle school. And yet she really didn't seem to want to spend much time in that townhouse. Which begs the question of why? Why did everybody hide out in their rooms in that townhouse? Why did they not really spend that much time together? And why, basically, when you finish work at 2:30, would you stay at your parents' place, have dinner there, and get home several hours later? Definitely avoidance of something. And yes, I know that there are some communities and cultures where families do still gather together for meals, even if they do live in different houses. But I just find it interesting that for her, it certainly seems to be one of those things where she just doesn't want to be in that house. Because she's also saying, on the weekends, we go hiking and doing all this stuff. So when she's not working, she's still out of that house.
All right. I'm going to now dig into kind of more detailed information. But before I start that, I know you and Jenn are friends. You and Stefan aren't necessarily friends. You and Angelica are kind of acquaintances too. And these type of investigations and the seriousness of some of these crimes, we need to get very, very detailed on specific things. Okay. I'm not going to ask you any uncomfortable things, which I don't think are uncomfortable. If you don't feel comfortable at answering some of the things, just let me know, and we can see if we can work around it, okay?
So he is at least signalling to her here that he needs some answers. Up until this point in the interview, he's let her give her vague answers. He's let her talk around things. He's let her redirect away from the question. But he says to her, because of the seriousness of these crimes, we need to get very, very detailed on specific things. He's basically just reminding her of why they are here. We're here because of what happened to Maddie. What happened to Maddie was very serious. So we are going to start pressuring you here for some clear answers. We need some specifics from you because this is about Maddie. he's definitely making it clear to her that the time for faffing around and giving vague answers is done, and it's time to actually start giving clear, specific answers. But obviously, when you're signalling to someone like that it's time to get serious, you don't want to lose that person that you are interviewing, in terms of you don't want them to shut down and become defensive. So he does follow up with the, if it's difficult for you, we'll work around it, essentially. Now, honestly, it's so long since I listened to this interview, and the main thing that stuck in my mind was the conversation about her messaging Jenn about Stefan and Maddie being in the room together. So I actually don't remember if Detective Morris redeemed himself here or not, in terms of actually getting her to answer questions. So let's delve in now and see how serious it actually gets with this questioning.
All right, so when the weekend of February 25th, 26th-ish, so let's say that's Saturday, so we could go from Saturday.
Okay.
Okay. You were still staying at the townhome? Is that what you call it?
The townhouse,
Okay.
yeah.
You were still staying there, I'm assuming. Living there, I guess you could.
Saturday, before everything happened, or yes, I was still living there up to recently.
Okay.
I moved out because I don't want to be in that house.
Right. Okay, so that's Saturday. Walk me through Saturday.
Okay. I want to say Saturday the 20th. Can I check to see the tickets for...
Yeah, absolutely.
My son likes anime, and a new Demon Slayer movie came out. I just don't know if it was that weekend or the last weekend. These last couple of days have been like one blur. Okay, so today is what day?
Today,
the 7th, okay.
that Saturday would have been the 24th. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, the 24th. Correct.
The Saturday was the 24th, which means I had tickets to go to South Chase at 7:20. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, we were watching this movie at the South Chase Theater.
Okay, in the evening of the Saturday.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we were there for 2 hours, starting at 7. Well, it's like an hour and 45 minutes. I was starting at 7:30.
Okay. During the day, were you at home?
Let me think that day. Because we had a late evening, I believe. I'm just trying to think, because we're always like in and out.
Mm-hmm.
If I was home between... We left by 6:15. So from 6, okay. Because was that Sunday? No. I'm trying to think, because we went to Lake Eola. Give me 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Let me look up my financials. I pay everything with cards, so...
I don't think anybody pays cash for anything nowadays.
There's some places that don't even accept it. It's kind of scary. Okay, the 24th. Let's see. Okay. Okay, I don't have anything on that day, so that means we went... we have gone that day?
So did anything as significant happen on Saturday that you could think of other than...
No, we were really just getting ready for this movie. I know that I at some point wished Maddie a happy belated birthday. I don't remember if that was Friday or Saturday, but I remember that because I felt bad because I had missed her birthday.
Okay, so they seem to be at cross purposes here again. He asks her to walk him through the Saturday, and you get this long delay with, well, you know, if I was home, and then lots of stalling, just lots of, we might have done this, we might have done that. Just the really vague answers, checking on her phone, checking things that were irrelevant. Now, you could say, well, he said, walk me through your Saturday. So you could say, well, she was just taking him literally and thinking that he wanted to know her exact movements for the Saturday. Let's talk about her job, though. As she works in the construction industry, it sounds like she does a lot of liaising in her work, which means that her interpersonal communication skills would have to be pretty high level. So she must have understood when he asked her that he was basically wanting to know about the townhouse, not about her personally. He didn't need an alibi from her. He didn't need to know every single minute of the day. He just needed to know basically when she was in the townhouse and if she observed anything. And yet she goes way, way, way down on this major detour trying to figure out when she went to see a movie and if they might have done this and looking up tickets and, you know, like I said, this is someone who should have fairly decent interpersonal skills, fairly decent communication skills. Did she really believe that's what he wanted from her? A blow-by-blow, moment-by-moment explanation of her day? Why didn't she ask for clarification? The reason I'm saying this is I'm just wondering if she was intentionally stalling here because Saturday was pretty much a safe zone. We know Maddie wasn't at the house on Saturday. She was with Yolanda, and then she had a meltdown about not wanting to go home, and Juan took her for lunch for burgers. So I'm willing to bet that she didn't cross paths with Maddie at all on the Saturday, and possibly only briefly cross paths with Jenn. If, as the data suggests, and as has been claimed by Chris and Stefan and Jenn eventually, if Stefan didn't arrive till the Sunday, then it's not like she's trying to hide anything here. Or is she? So I guess the question is she just confused and thinking that she has to give a blow-by-blow description of the entire day of Saturday? Or is she stalling for time? He basically gives her a bit of time to do all this and then asks her he wants to narrow it in. He doesn't want to spend all day just trying to find out irrelevant things about the Saturday. So he asks her outright, did anything significant happen on the Saturday? This is when she basically says that she wished Maddie a belated birthday on the Friday or the Saturday because she missed her birthday. So based on that, that would make me think that Maddie must have been around at some point on the Friday, because her birthday would have been the Thursday, I think, from memory, just trying to think back date-wise. So in terms of her wishing Maddie a belated birthday, unless Maddie was around there on Saturday morning before Nathalie headed off, or maybe Maddie came back Saturday evening. I'm not sure. It's, again, she's vague. She doesn't know whether it was Friday or Saturday. He hasn't clarified whether it was morning or afternoon, which may have helped to narrow down that timeline, although it's probably not hugely significant other than the speculation that we've had in terms of that Maddie may have been at Yolanda's from the Wednesday on. But, the other thing we have to consider here is that she knew Maddie since Maddie was a baby. So the loss of Maddie is a traumatic experience for her. This is only a week later. So, her mind is all over the place, I think. So it's quite likely that she just doesn't know what was going on before Maddie went missing. Because your brain does tend to do that. All the things leading up to it may just be all mixed in together. All the things after may just be all mixed in together, and it may be harder for her to pin down the timeline. I would imagine if she was asked to describe the last time she saw Maddie, she could probably go into quite clear details again of where Maddie was when she saw her, what Maddie was wearing, what conversation they had, because it's probably something that her brain has worked through. You just do that. It's like you're trying to have them there again with you. Trying to relive those moments when they were still around. Trying to hang on to them. So, yes, I could imagine that she would be quite clear on the details of that, but possibly not the when. And everything around that didn't relate to Maddie probably was insignificant and just became a muddle.
But no, we probably woke up early. I don't have any transactions, meaning we went for a walk.
Mm-hmm.
Came home, took a shower, started doing my stuff that I typically do on Saturday nights. I was doing it before, so that we can be ready for the movie. But nothing seemed out of normal.
Okay, so she's spent a lot of time describing the Saturday, basically painting a very clear picture of just your average Saturday. Nothing different happened, nothing significant happened. She saw Maddie at some point in time, whether it was Saturday or Friday, she doesn't know. but she wished her a belated birthday. So she's painted this picture of just an ordinary Saturday, nothing was happening, nothing was going on. But she has to add that emphasis of nothing seemed out of normal. I wonder if she had witnessed Maddie being upset on the Saturday. Because honestly, we don't know if Maddie came home Saturday night or not, because that's something that hasn't really been clearly answered. Nobody seems capable of giving a clear answer in terms of the timeline with Maddie for the days leading up to her birthday. We know that she spent time with Yolanda and Juan on the Saturday. We don't know if she came home. And we're not even getting any answer with regards to that from Nathalie either. But we are getting nothing seemed out of normal. Now, it could just be that that is genuine. But there was nothing that stood out on the Saturday. But at this point in the interview, I've kind of lost faith in Nathalie's ability to give a straight answer. And I do feel that she has been steering around things very carefully during this interview. So when she finishes describing a very, very ordinary day and has to finish off by saying, but nothing seemed out of the normal, or out of normal, then I have to question, did nothing seem out of normal? Or is there something that she just doesn't want to discuss? Maybe I'm being unfair on her here, but like I said, she's made it hard for me to be fair on her because of her avoidance of topics. And the thing is, we know Saturday is significant. For some reason, Maddie was extremely upset. Apparently, Stefan was extremely upset and distressed. And Jenn claims that she didn't take her medications on the Saturday night. This is someone who is so heavily addicted to her medications that it seems highly unlikely for her to forget to take her medications on the Saturday night. And certainly, given that one of her medications is meant to knock her out and allow her to sleep, had she not taken them on the Saturday night, then she would have realised, after she'd been lying in bed for several hours unable to get to sleep. Unless, of course, there was something significant happening or something significant that was upsetting everybody on the Saturday night, and maybe Jenn was just too upset over something to remember to take her medications, and maybe sleep wasn't an issue on the Saturday night because her mind was elsewhere. I don't know. That's pure speculation, but it just seems frustrating that nobody seems to know what happened on Saturday. We only get these little snippets and a lot of nothing.
Now, Sunday. You see the movie Saturday night. Do you go back home Saturday night, or did you come here?
No. I
Come back home. Okay.
Yeah.
So Sunday, walk me through Sunday, what you did that day.
Pretty sure we went to the Lake Eola Park.
Morning, afternoon,
In the
evening?
morning.
Okay.
Yeah. They have I think you guys know they have like a market, a farmer's market. So there was this. He didn't like anything at the farmer's market, and he saw sushi on the way there. So we wanted to stop by sushi. We ate. We were there until I want to say 12:30, 1 o'clock. And then we started heading back home. I'm trying to think. The moment that okay, let me think.
So I'll just try to help you out a little bit. When you get home, is anybody home?
No, I got home a little bit on the earlier side because we had gone out so early, and we had been walking around, so my son was tired, and we kind of just ended up staying home by 6:30. We're watching a movie snuggled up. By 8 o'clock, he's knocking out, and my Mondays are always really hard, so I try to get some sleep before. But I didn't see anybody there when I got there.
Well, that's a direct contradiction to what she had already said. She said that she saw Maddie at around 12 o'clock on the Sunday before Maddie went to her birthday party. But now she's saying they left early in the morning, went to this farmer's market, started heading back around 12:30. And he asks her, he wants to be specific, was there anyone there when you got back to the townhouse? And she's like, I didn't see anybody there when I got there. So suddenly she's forgotten that she saw Maddie there at the townhouse when she got home? Or is it that all this vagueness from the Saturday, maybe she saw Maddie at around 12 o'clock then, and she's got her days muddled up? There is another possibility that we need to consider. And for that, we need to think about when the officers turned up at the townhouse on the early morning of the Tuesday, so it was about 12, a little bit after 12 a.m. They turned up at the townhouse and interviewed Jenn and Stefan. And it was Nathalie who answered the door. Nathalie was clearly downstairs hanging out with Jenn and Stefan. And even after she answered the door, she didn't head off upstairs. She hung around downstairs while they were doing that interview. Which begs the question. Jenn and Stefan were thoroughly toasted when they did that interview. So if she was hanging out with them, was she also getting into whatever they were on? Does she like to get into the recreational stuff on the weekend when she's hanging out with Jenn? And is that why she can't remember what happened on the Saturday? And why she is getting confused about seeing Maddie on the Sunday? I mean, on one hand, she gives the impression of being this super responsible parent who's basically made her life fit around her son's schedule. But is it possible that on weekends after he's gone to bed, when she doesn't have to get up and go to work in the morning, that she kicks back a little bit with Jenn? And maybe that's why she's so vague about her weekend. So then she moves on to talking about the evening, and she's basically saying by 6:30 they were winding down watching a movie, and by 8 o'clock her son was knocking out, in her words. And that does seem to fit with her regular routine. that she had already described in terms of heading to bed quite early, getting up quite early. I mean, if she's trying to head out of the house by 7:45 at the latest on a weekday, then sure, she probably allows her son to sleep in, because I would imagine he's having breakfast at her parents' place. But she has to prepare herself for work, so she's getting up somewhere between 6:30, 6:45. I mean, when you're a parent, you've got to get up a bit earlier to be able to get your kid organised. I mean, he's still got to get dressed and everything. So she does get up super early of a morning. So I can understand the early nights and him crashing out at 8. But here's my issue. Essentially what we are being told here is that she was home on the Sunday night when Maddie got home. Sure, she might have already gone to bed, and she'll get to that shortly. But she was home. So it's not like Maddie was being dropped off in an empty house. Were there issues? Maddie would have known Nathalie was there. Maddie had known Nathalie since she was a baby. So surely Jenn could have actually teed things up along the lines of, can you stay up until Maddie gets home? Just make sure she has her meds and make sure she gets started getting ready for bed. And saying to Maddie, if there's a problem, Nathalie's there. But instead, she needed to get Stefan there, apparently. There's so much that's not being said here. But look, someone's got to say it. How convenient is it that by the time Maddie gets home, they're already pretty much tucked in and out for the count?
At any point that night, did anybody come home that you know of?
I never really, I always keep the TV so loud, which I'm not doing anymore. But no, in my little corner, I never really, paid attention, I guess. Mm-hmm. But no, I once my son falls asleep, I can rest, mm-hmm. and I just kind of knock out or go into my own little world.
Okay, just wow. It was a simple question. At any point in time, we're talking Sunday night, did anybody come? Should have been a simple yes or no, or not that I was aware of. But she has to go into extreme detail here as to why she's not aware of anything occurring on that Sunday night. But she can't even finish her sentences in doing so. I never really, change direction. How many times does she say like? It seems like, and then I say it and it's like, oh my gosh. It seems like that is one of her classic stalling words. And when I hear her say that, I also think that she's perhaps not being entirely accurate in what she's saying. It's kind of like you're saying, well, sorta. So I always keep the TV loud. Not doing that anymore. I'll come back to that in a minute. So she finally gets one sentence out in full. But then she gets all stumbled and ran in circles again. But, no, I. How many times can you try to start a sentence in my little corner? And then, I never really, and she says so quietly, paid attention, I guess. So she finished that sentence, but it took her forever to get it out. There were so many false starts. And like I've said, and like most of you know now, the brain doesn't like to lie. One of the things you see so often when someone is being not quite so truthful is that they have trouble finishing a sentence. Well, heck, she had trouble here. And then even after that, we get, but no, once my son falls asleep, like, I can rest, like, I just kind of knock out or go into my own little world. So even just saying 2 simple sentences has taken her forever. And she's basically had all these false starts, pauses, and then tried to restart what she was saying. If this isn't an example of someone over-explaining, I don't know what is. The simple question, is she aware of anyone actually coming on the Sunday night? Was she aware of Maddie arriving, basically, or Stefan arriving? Was she aware of anyone on the Sunday night? Not a simple yes or no, but a really long answer with so many aborted sentences. And the main reason she's saying here of being unaware of everything is because she always keeps the TV so loud. I have a problem with that on multiple levels. Let's start with the fact that she shares that house with other people. Upstairs, there is another person a room away. And yes, she hadn't gotten home at that point in time on the Sunday night, but she did get home, and presumably after a long shift at work, she probably just wanted to go to bed. Angelica comes across as an extremely quiet kind of person, and I would imagine that she's not the person that would cope too well with someone having a TV blaring in the room next door to hers. Again, it's a small townhouse. You have Jenn and Maddie sleeping downstairs, apparently, supposedly. There's no carpets. The noise would surely echo down that stairwell if she had the TV really loud. Not only that, it's not like these townhouses are like stratum title, as in each completely separate with a gap between them and the next townhouse. There is a townhouse right next door to theirs. So would she really have a TV blaring, given the other people around that would be affected by that? Because even if she is a massive narcissist, I would imagine that people would have had issues and would have complained. But here's the biggest thing, the biggest problem I have with her saying that she always keeps the TV so loud. Her son is autistic. Now, anyone who is familiar with the autism spectrum knows that as part of that, people who are on the autism spectrum and people with ADHD, so this would have affected Maddie also, are incredibly sensitive to noise, to the point where loud noises are physically painful for them. You may see people at family events and they may have a child walking around with those big noise-cancelling headphones. You may, if you have children or grandchildren, you may go to a school assembly and you may spot that child sitting in the assembly with a pair of noise-cancelling headphones on because they physically cannot cope with the noise. It is literally painful. It is not just they don't like the noise, it is a source of extreme discomfort. And I've never encountered anybody who is on the autism spectrum who doesn't have that extreme sensitivity to noise. Can you honestly tell me that her son would have coped with having a loud TV going even before he was trying to get to sleep? He's autistic, or the correct term is on the autism spectrum. For a child like that, being shut in a small room with a TV going really loud, that would basically, you would expect it to lead to a major meltdown. And if you've ever seen an autism meltdown, they're pretty spectacular. Would she really do that? Or is this just a convenient excuse so that she can say that she heard nothing? She was unaware of anyone coming in.
Do you keep your TV on all night?
I have a really bad habit, yeah.
Okay.
So he's asking her if she kept her TV on all night, and she said very quietly that basically until that happened, yeah. I've said the issues I have with this. I find it very surprising that someone with a child who is on the spectrum would actually have a TV playing loudly, and especially that they would have it playing through the night. Because I can guarantee not just would he have been affected, but Maddie was diagnosed with ADHD. Now, it could have been PTSD, it could have been a combination of both. Either way, both diagnoses, when you look at them, she would have been ultra sensitive to someone having a TV blaring all night. So, were she to have her TV going all night, it would have had an impact on her son, probably would have had an impact on Angelica, it almost certainly would have had an impact on Maddie, even though she was supposedly downstairs. So either she really is an utter narcissist and wasn't even concerned about the issues for her son, for Maddie, for the people around her, or this is perhaps an over-exaggeration. Maybe she does need background noise to sleep, and maybe she has the TV going quietly in the background. But to say that it's going loud in the background, I really do have questions about that. Particularly with her claiming that this was something that she did all night and that it was something normal up until the point when Maddie went missing. So this seems like a convenient place to stop yet again. After this, he moves on to talking about Monday morning. So I think it's probably best to head down that rabbit hole in a new video. So on that note, I'm curious to know your thoughts. I've certainly taken on board a lot of the things that people have said in the comments from the previous video of this. And I think some of the things that I hadn't considered are actually quite valid points. So on that note, thank you for listening. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit the like button, and of course, please do leave a comment below. I am loving reading everyone's comments. Again, I apologise for not getting a chance to respond to everyone's comments. I do prioritise members. So for those of you who are members, then I always do my best to try and get to your comments to respond. And I do try and find the time to respond to as many comments as I can. But there's just not enough hours in the day sometimes. So on that note, thank you, and I will catch you in the next one.
I've been